U.S. lawmakers will vote on Thursday regarding whether to impose stricter background checks on gun sales after the second worst mass school shooting in the nation's history has happened earlier this week.
And VOA congressional correspondent Katherine Gypson reports for Metro Globe Network.
19 children and 2 adults dead in a mass shooting at an elementary school in Texas Tuesday. Killings that have reopened the nation's debate over regulating guns. Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott confronted by his Democratic opponent, Beto O'Rourke, who alleged his loosening of gun laws led to the tragedy.
This is totally predictable when you...
Sir, you're out of line.
The governor said the 18-year-old gunman, Salvador Ramos, did not show any warning signs until just before the shooting. And Abbott called for greater support for mental health services instead of stricter gun laws.
I hate to say this, but there are more people who were shot every weekend in Chicago than there are in schools in Texas. And we need to realize that people who think that, well, maybe if we could just implement tougher gun laws, it's going to solve it. Chicago and L.A. and New York disprove that thesis.
U.S. President Joe Biden called on the narrowly Democratic-controlled Congress to pass new regulations.
When in God's name will we do what needs to be done to, if not completely stop, fundamentally change the amount of the carnage that goes on in this country?
Democrats said they wanted to move quickly to pass new regulations.
America's gun epidemic is unmatched by any of our peer nations in the world. No American is safe from it, and the American people are sick and tired of it.
But noted such efforts had been stopped in the past.
This is a gun industry talking point. The gun industry wants to stop any discussion about changing the laws after these mass shootings, because they know that that's the moment when the public is demanding policy change.
While Republicans acknowledge the scope of the tragedy,
it's literally sickening to consider the innocent young lives that were stolen by this pointless, senseless brutality.
They cautioned against limiting Americans' constitutional right to bear arms. Protests have consistently failed to move Congress to pass new regulations every time there is a mass shooting.
The assumption is that if any policy that advocates for any kind of reform is a prelude to confiscation, right, and to sort of a sweeping reform in the sort of model of New Zealand. That's not what's being proposed. There are lots of legislative measures that have been proposed that would create some obstacles for people who are trying to commit these kinds of acts, right?
According to 2021 Pew Research Center polling, half of Americans see gun violence as a very big problem. And a broad number of both Democrats and Republicans favor background checks on private and gun show sales.